Lastly, I'll explain the risks associated with Brrrr, and I feel like many people brush over the risks, but I want to be transparent. There are several risks associated with real estate investing in general, and more specifically with this strategy. So a little bit more about myself. I started investing in 2009. Primarily, most of my investments have been in Philadelphia. Along with my investing career, I had a pretty successful accounting career as well, where I was a CPA for 8 years. Until recently, my roles have reversed, and I became a full-time developer and investor, and a part-time CPA. So in my CPA business, I help with bookkeeping, taxes, and I also do audit consulting and overall business consulting as well. But my main focus has been real estate development for the last 2 months. So I also like to say that I achieved 30 by 30. So what I mean by that is 30 rental units by the age of 30. There's a little technicality to that. My rental units are not finished. I have a 6-unit in place and 2 single families that will be finished by the end of the year, and that will get me to 30 by 30 completely, but I'm still saying 30 by 30. I hope that passes with you guys. And then in addition to that, I'm actually a real estate agent. I'm licensed in Pennsylvania. I typically do not deal with first-time home buyers. Even one of my best friends, like we grew up together, he wanted to buy a house in Philly. I actually referred him out to probably the best real estate agent that he could have for that specific area he was looking at. And I could have hooked him up and maybe even gave a little kickback on commission, but I thought it was better off for him to get the best service. So what I do with my license is I send offers right away, very quickly. I use my license for that. I'm not waiting for an agent. I can get lockbox codes when I'm out walking around. If I see a sign or if I hear something, I can get the lockbox code right away. And then if I am doing a flip, I save a lot of money if I sell my own property. And these days in Philly, basically to sell a property, all you have to do is put it on lockbox, and you're gonna sell that property. So I mean, it's pretty much the easiest money you're gonna save in this. And with my real estate development portion, I do rehab to sell, ground up to sell, and rehab to rent. So I'm pretty much all over the place. I've even kind of wholesaled, but that wasn't truly on purpose. It was just we had a couple of vacant properties, and we were doing a large scale project in which we needed to loosen up cash, and we actually sold our vacants. And all 4 of the vacants that we sold, we doubled up on. So say the property was we bought for 25 grand, we sold one for 60. So like it turned out very successful in that regard, because the neighborhoods we were purchasing in were doing great at that time. So, but like I said, I'm not really a wholesaler, and I don't intend to wholesale. I intend to buy. So the Brrrr strategy in a little bit more detail. It's a name invented by Brandon Turner of Bigger Pockets, and I'm not sure if you guys know what Bigger Pockets is, but you should know what Bigger Pockets is. Especially your newbies out there, that's a site you should be on for 2 hours a day. Right? The days lasting. Are you agreeing?
3 days.
Yeah.
Right. You're absolutely right.
You have a question?
Oh no, I was gonna say maybe if people don't know what Brrrr stands for, maybe you might
want to tell them. All right, so that's where the icon is coming up. Brrrr stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. So it's basically combining the flipping process and the flipping process with the rehab, and the rent and hold process as well. So it's combining everything at one time. And the combination of those 2 elements allows you to get a great deal, allows you to refinance out almost all your money, and allows you to obtain cash flow and hold on to the property. So in my mind, it's like the ultimate strategy. So it's also known as rehab to rent as well. So that's another name for it. So you can hear both names. And now I'm going to give you a quick example of the Brrrr strategy. I'm going to actually write up on the board so you guys can see. I'm gonna have to turn the computer around too. So, remind me of the numbers. So this is a property that I did. I couldn't tell you the exact time, but maybe like 2014, 2015. And what I typically do in Philly is I purchase vacant properties or very, very distressed properties. So most of the times you're going to see my rehab numbers a lot higher than my purchase numbers. In this case, and pretty much all my properties in Philly are row homes, your standard row homes with masonry construction, your 100-year-old beams going through the house. Poorly, at that time when they started putting plumbing, they started cutting up beams, so you always have that as well. And sometimes the design isn't that great. So what I like to do is I like to buy almost the worst property, redesign it, and make it a livable, open design for the new concept that's out right now. And I do this in higher end neighborhoods too. So a lot of my neighborhoods are in this up and coming neighborhood areas. So there are low income houses on the block or in the neighborhood, but these are transitioning neighborhoods. So in this particular property, I bought the property for $40,000. And my rehab costs were $60,000. I think that should say 80. That's actually 80, sorry. So there was $80,000, which gives me a total of 120. So that was my all-in cost. That also includes interest as well. So in the rehab number, I probably included interest and insurance. And I'm an accountant, so I see it that way more than anything, where you're capitalizing everything before you get to the put in service spot, right? So that's basically the total cost, $120,000. And for that $120,000, now this is almost the flip side. Okay, so I purchased this property for $40, put $80,000 into it. My total cost is $120,000. So on the flip side, I want this number to be at least 70% of what it could sell for, right? And 70% is a margin that bigger pockets use. It's a margin that I loosely use as well. But in this case, I didn't choose to sell the property. I chose to appraise it, get it appraised, go to a bank and get it financed. And at that time, my appraisal came in at $205,000. And at that time as well, I was able to get an LTV of 80%. The LTV at 80% is hard to get, and I'm more getting 70 and 75 now, but at that time I was able to get 80%.
I don't know if people know what LTV is.
LTV is loan to value, right? So loan to value, when I say 70% or 80%, so at 80%, I was able to get $164,000. So it's basically what loan they're willing to give for the value of the property. And because I had an independent appraiser appraise this property at 205, they're willing to give the percentage that they stated at that time was 80%. So at 80%, you have $164,000. Okay, so this 164,000 is the cash that I received from the bank, and as you can see, my cost was 120,000. So I was able to pull an extra 44,000 from the bank.
Did you season the property, like have a tenant in it for any period of time?
Yeah.
When you
So
refinanced?
yeah. So typically, what banks require is a lease, and I've gotten a lot of banks lately that don't require seasoning. If you do Freddie and Fannie Mae products, so if you don't buy a property in an LLC, you put in your personal name, use your income to support the refinance, then you're probably gonna have to season the property for a year. And I'm not completely sure on that because I haven't done that in a while. Typically, banks are saying 6 months, but at this point, they're not asking for 6 months anymore from me.
6 months with a tenant
6 months season. So
that you own.
yeah, that I don't. I mean, typically, I try to turn them around in 2 to 3 months and get the tenant in by the 3rd or 4th month. So they haven't really slowed me down with the season. They slowed me down though because they like to take a long time, but that's a different story and a different presentation. So in this regard, say I'm going to actually explain the difference between this and flipping. But in this regard, I was able to pull $44,000 extra in cash. Some people call that income. I don't prefer to call that income. I prefer to call it working capital or extra working capital, because in my mind, you're taking a heavy loan on a property. I like to put that 40,000 maybe into a low-income property on the other side of the river or the other side of the bridge, and use that 40,000 to produce extra income. Right. So that's my technique. So the other thing related to this is your rent ratio, and you got to make sure that your rent ratio is nice enough for the banks and nice enough so that you're pulling a little bit of cash flow as well. And I'll go through that in a little bit more detail as well. All right. So through this example, I'm going to kind of talk about the benefits of Brrrr. Brrrr allows you to combine equity growth of flipping and investment of rental property. So in this example, again, we have 164,000 that came back to us, but we still have 20% equity in the property. Right? So we're combining both the flipping, where in flipping you would lose this equity, right? You would just get the gain. So we're combining both of those. And another thing that Brrrr does is, say I was to flip this property, and let's just use the same numbers after all costs and stuff. That I was able to pull 164 back, and that the spread was 44,000. When you flip the property, you're gonna incur taxes, usually at your ordinary income tax rate. And there's a couple of different ways to try to make it not so, but it's usually going to be your ordinary income tax rate. You have a question?
How do you determine whether it's, I guess, what's better? How do you weigh it? In the sense that you pulled out 164,000 from this property.
Yeah.
You didn't have to. You could have pulled out 120 and broken even. Now, if you would have pulled out the 120, obviously your
Cash flow.
Your cash flow would have been higher every month.
Yeah.
Versus lowering your cash flow every month and then taking that extra chunk and using it for something else.
Yeah, and that's always a debate. Right now, I'm in growth mode. Like without a doubt, I'm in growth mode. I'm taking loans, private loans for up to 12%. So for me, if I can pull an extra 40,000 off of this property, I'm saving, because this rate was probably 4.5 to 5.5%. So I'm saving money in that rate. So as much working capital I can get, I'm trying to get more working capital So that's how I make the decision in terms of trying to refinance and pull out as much money as possible. It's always trying to get the most money as possible. In terms of whether I'm flipping or doing the Brrrr strategy, that's a more difficult answer, and I don't know if I even have that answer. Anyone really does, because every property is so different, and I guess you just make your decision, see how much money you're making that year, and try to set it up with that.
So basically, like, instead of cashing out, you're kind of rolling over the profit into another property?
Yeah, like, and especially at, when I was doing that, when I did this property, I was working as an accountant full time, right? So I was making plenty of money to live my life and do what I needed to do. And if I get any excess money, I'm going to put it into real estate anyway, right? So in this sense, I was able to pull the extra money, get it tax free almost, and put it back into real estate, right? Because that's my end game, is try to acquire as much property as possible. So I think flipping is great if you're looking to live a better lifestyle and this and that, but I think at the end of the game, if you're making a lot of money in flipping, you also want to move to that rental game and try to acquire wealth with the rental game. So this is combined, I suppose. And
How much rent were you able to pull out of that property?
I think 1,400. And for the New Jersey guys, like, that sounds ridiculously low. You got to understand that the taxes on this property are $500 a year. So, like, I don't even think that would work in around this area, numbers wise. Now I think I'm getting like 1,500 for it, so it increased a little bit. And taxes actually went up in this neighborhood too, but it's still working out.
And if you roll in the full amount that you made, roll into another property, there is no tax, there's no capital gains, obviously not hitting you with anything.
Yeah, so I'm not going to roll in the full amount. This is my cash already in here, whether it's from a private investor or from myself. This is cash that I had to either put back into my bank account or put it back into somebody else's bank account. So this is just excess cash, excess working capital. There's 44,000. Yeah, and it's basically tax free. It's you're grabbing that cash tax free and putting it in another property, or you can just spend it if you want to. So this technique, it works with single families as well as multifamily. So that's another benefit. I actually have one that I'm doing a 6-unit for, and I was able to get construction financing after I purchased the property. And what that allowed me to do is basically guarantee that I was going to get the appraisal I needed to get before I started construction. And it's allowing me to use the Brrrr strategy while refunding me my construction money. All right, so that was great. It's a 6-unit. I guess the downside of construction financing, and if you are to take construction financing, the banks always will put you in a position where you have more money into the deal than you want to have, right? So say they're going to give you $100,000, you're going to end up putting $50,000 into it, and they're going to give you $30,000 back. You're going to have to put $75,000, and they're going to give you $60,000, and you're going to have to put the full $100,000, and they're going to give you $80,000, and then you get it rented out, and then you get your full money back. So you always have to have a little bit of money, a little bit of cushion with construction financing as well. And then as I explained this deal, this was actually like a real good appraisal and 80%, which allowed cash to come back out. But there are, if you do the numbers right, there's many times instances where you're going to be straight even, or you're going to have to put just a little bit of money down. So this is a technique that allows you to do low to no money down fairly consistently. And then the benefits of Brrrr, or also just the benefits of buy and hold. So there's an acronym on Bigger Pockets. I'm a big fan of Bigger Pockets. So there's an acronym on Bigger Pockets for buy and hold. It's called IDEAL. And IDEAL is you're getting income, you're getting depreciation, and depreciation is basically a tax benefit of holding properties, right? You depreciate properties for like 30 years, let's say, right? And that depreciation takes away from your taxable income, which looks great on your tax payment, but it also looks like you're making no money sometimes on your Schedule E. So it's a great way to kind of get cash flow and almost tax-free cash flow in that regard.
And there's like always depreciation.
There's always depreciation. If you have a good accountant, you will have depreciation. But there's a lot of accountants that out there that don't even put that in there. So you just got to be careful. Make sure you have somebody good. You also get equity buildup. So you're paying down your mortgages in your strategy. So you're actually not even paying down the mortgages. Your tenant are paying down the mortgages. And if you look at any amortization table, you're going to slowly pay down that mortgage, pay down your mortgage, and increase your equity at the same time. So that's another benefit of a buy and hold strategy. And then the next two things, appreciation. And any seasoned investor will tell you don't bet on appreciation, don't buy properties for appreciation. But there's always that added benefit of appreciation. So if you're able to buy these properties, buy and hold these properties, I've heard that the historical appreciation on homes in general are 5%, right? So at 5%, if you could hold a whole bunch of properties and just get 5% appreciation on them, you're going to do great. And lastly, the next thing is leverage, and a leverage return is almost always better than a cash-on-cash return. And if you think about investments in general, investments in the stock market, the average consumer is going to have trouble leveraging any stock market investments, right? In real estate, completely different though. Like the average consumer in real estate can leverage even their own home. Excuse me. They can leverage even their own home, and they can easily leverage rental properties. So those are the benefits of buy and hold in general. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about an economic theory that I like to tell everybody with the buy and hold strategy, and go into a little bit about exponential growth as well. So exponential growth, I'm sure you guys all have seen it. This is the graph right here. It's basically your straight line return is going to look like this, and your exponential growth return. Let me see if I can get the curve right, like that. So basically, this is the same graph that most people show when they try to sell you an investment in the stock market, or try to tell you to put in your 401k. So basically, if you put in your 401k early and you get a 6% return, like say from 28, you're going to see a line like this. And if you start later, you're going to see a line like that, right? So same type of theory with the Brrrr strategy. What the Brrrr strategy allows is, because you're putting your money back into the investment, you're actually creating an exponential growth curve, right? You're taking your money, you're using your money, putting it back into to your business, and then creating that curve. So you're getting exponential growth. And then the economic theory that I love to explain. So back when I was in school, what really hit me hard was when the professor was talking about inflation, right? So he mentioned that in periods of inflation, you want to hold an asset, right? An asset that's not that doesn't have risk towards inflation, right? So as we all know, inflation is 1.8 or 2.8, something like that. There's always inflation because we're set up to have inflation in our market, right? So in that term, you want to hold as many assets as you can, and you're basically making 2.8% because of inflation, right? On the other side, you disagree?
I didn't get the number, so I didn't understand how you get the number. So there's 1.6. When-
I said 1.8 or 2.8.
Right.
I'm not sure what it is. You guys can Google if you want, but say it's 2.8. So if you hold an asset, you're basically not losing money or creating 2.8% return on your investment. Also, in periods of inflation, you want to hold leverage or you want to hold debt, right? So say you have $100,000 debt and inflation rises, right? Your debt is actually worth less. So therefore, you're making money on your debt. And that's a tough one to understand. So let's see if I can explain it a little bit better. So say I borrowed $100,000 from somebody, right? And I didn't get any payments for 10 years, right? That $100,000 could buy me like a nice single family house. But in 10 years, that $100,000 might not be able to buy me that $100,000 house, and it's going to actually be worth less, right? So on the debt side, you want to hold debt and you want to hold asset, and in real estate, and especially in this strategy, you're able to do both of them.
You said sell during high appreciation, high inflation rate? Sell during high inflation rate?
No, I might have said that, but I wasn't. No, I was saying.
Talk about your money, I get that point.
Yeah, so you want to have leverage, you want to have debt during periods of inflation, and you want to have an asset during periods of inflation. And this strategy allows you to have both, and that's a key wealth building.
I think you should clarify that should be good debt, not just.
Yeah.
Car. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not just like you bought like a $100,000 car.
Yeah. So how the banks judge their rates? They have a portion in their rate for risk-free return, and then they add inflation risk, and then they add just your general risk. So inflation risk is already in their 5.2. So you're basically, if you take debt, you're almost taking debt at like 3%, if it's at 5%. So for me, it makes sense to take that. And then I also talk about leverage here, and it's going to be impossible to see the numbers on here, but let me try to read them out. All in all, it's saying that your investment is going to do a lot better in terms of rate of return if you leverage your debt. If you leverage your property. And I put assumptions on here, and then it shows the interest rates or your rate of return rates. So my assumptions were $100,000 in cost, $1,000 in rent, 75% loan to value, a 4.75% loan at 5.25, which means 5-year rate lock, 25-year amortization. Additional assumptions were 35% expenses on your gross rent. And then I had insurance and tax as well. I had my insurance rate at $800, and this is probably the typical 1,000 square foot, $100,000 property. That would be $800. And then I had taxes at $500, which again is a lot different than New Jersey, which would be your typical tax rate for $100,000. What's that? That's a month in Jersey, right? Yeah. And then I had 25% tax bracket. So basically, what these numbers are showing you are that if you have no mortgage, your return based on these numbers are going to be 6.45%. And what I mean by return is like the same judgment that you can use to compare your rate of return in the stock market, right? So they say the average stock market rate of return is like 6-7%. On this property, without a mortgage, you're going to get 6.45%, considering that there's an accrual for 35% in expenses. But if you do leverage that property, your first year's return are going to be closer to 11%. And the reason for that is because if you're taking $100,000, your cash on cash return on $100,000 is just 100,000 minus your net income or under your net income, right? So that's how I get that 6.45%. So if you leverage a property, that 100,000 at 75% becomes 25%, or 25,000. I'm sorry. You leverage your property at 75%. That 100,000 becomes 25,000 cash invested in the deal, right? So this net income number changes because now you have a mortgage payment, but it changes in the stance where because your denominator, I haven't used that word in a while, because your denominator is severely reduced, you're actually creating a better rate of return. Does anybody have any questions?
Can you give an example? We have a lot of newbies in here. Can you give an example of how to leverage a property, like what you're talking about? Like if you can do it on the board so they can.
Yeah. So this is similar, but I'll do this example on the board. So the assumptions again were 100K property purchase. You have $1,000 a month in rent, 800 and 500. This was insurance, and this was taxes. And then we had 35%, so 350 for capital expenditures and other expenses. And going back to Bigger Pockets, I think Bigger Pockets likes to do a 50% rule for expenses. So this isn't anywhere close to the.
Well, the insurance and the rent and the taxes.
Or
Those
annual.
were annual.
Yeah.
Right, so that's only like $100 a month and $80 a month.
Yeah, true. All right, that's right. 350 divided by 12, $30. And then this is $50.
Yeah, for simplicity, why don't you just assume $1,000 rent, 500 expenses, 250 debt service, and that gives you 250
All right, that's a good
NOI
idea.
for the month.
You said 500 mortgage or 250?
I said, I said 1,000 rent, 50% of that being your expenses, and then 50% of the remainder being your debt service. And those are pretty good, those are normally pretty rough numbers. So you're 250, so you wind up with 250.
Yeah, I think that's actually pretty good. 75.
If you're charging the right rent, and, the other numbers are right.
All right.
Right, so then you're making 250 a month
Yeah.
NOI. So that's, that's 3,000 a year total income. So you're 3,000 over your 100K, 3% return if you paid it all cash. But if you had 80% financing, you've only got 20,000 in the door, so you're getting 3,000 of the $20,000 investment.
Yeah, but we're not covering debt on the 100,000 cash. So
Sure, it's in there at 250.
it's in there at 250, but if we're all in cash, we don't have to
Okay.
worry.
Oh, no, I understand.
Yeah.
Right, okay, you're right.
Yeah, so it's actually going to be a little bit more than it's going to be $9,000. So it's going to be a 9%, 9% cash on cash return. And then if you do have the debt, the calculation actually gets a little bit complicated. I need to use Excel for this, but basically what I'm trying to say is this 100,000 leverage will be only 25,000 into the deal. And that's going to be your denominator. So this 9,000 was right here, which equals 9%. And then your net income is actually going to change because you're going to have a mortgage payment involved as well. So it's gonna change this, and I haven't seen it otherwise, but most of the time, it should create a rate of return that's in excess of your cash return. I see a lot of blank stares.
A lot of numbers, that's what it is.
We need Excel.
Go ahead.
I believe when I read your bio, so you accumulated 30 rentals, is that correct?
Yeah, there's an asterisk to that, but yeah, it's 30
So
by
my
30.
question is, that was just intro. The main question is, did you use the same thing for financial institution for the refi? Because my understanding is that most banks, even if you have a good job, you know, your salary, all that good stuff, like all that good stuff. My understanding is that most banks will only allow you to have 5 properties mortgaged.
Yeah, so
So how are you able to get that many? That's
so
what I want to know.
so that's correct if you're looking at banks that sell their mortgages to Fannie and Freddie. So if you buy a property in your personal name and you go to Wells Fargo, you go to PNC Bank, you go to these big banks, you're allowed a personal home mortgage purchase, and you're allowed 4 investment properties to refinance out. And there's also a debate that you can do 5 to 10 as well if you do purchase side only. But I have not seen that in practice, right? So you're right about that regard. Then when you get past that 5 property mark, what you do is you go to these smaller banks, these credit unions, banks that don't have the largest names, and they actually carry the mortgage themselves in their own portfolio, and that's how you get your from 5 to as many as you want, pretty much.
They hold the notes over time.
Yeah. So you're right in that regard, but it's basically some people call it portfolio loan or portfolio mortgage. So that was the leverage return, and then I think I went through this in detail with the Tasker Street property. With these numbers to the right hand side, we cost at $120,000, and your cash back portion of $44,000. So that's your Brrrr, and with your Brrrr strategy, you get all the benefits if you buy and hold. You get your 20% equity, and you get your house, right? And compare that to a flip. So if I use these same numbers on a flip, and I use this 205,000. So again, in the Philadelphia region, I like to assume 10% on the sale, and the reason for that is because the city of Philadelphia charges 3% transfer tax, PA charges 1% transfer tax, and let's say 6% to the buyers, to the brokers transacting the deal. So I like to say 10%. There's also seller's assist most of the time, and again, your transfer taxes are going to be split between buyer and seller, so you're actually only going to see 2%. But that seller assist usually comes up a lot, so 10% is a good margin to take away from your gross. So if this was a flip property, I think I had 184,000 that I would receive after sale, considering all commissions and all selling expenses. And this is really big for I guess newbie flippers to really consider this and know the laws and regulations and know what your gross is going to turn to net on the HUD, right? Because if you don't know these numbers, you're going to come up with a surprise. So especially, and you can always negotiate 5% for your real estate broker, but 5% off of anything is pretty much a lot of money. So you gotta know those numbers. So your gain potential, I have it calculated as 64,000 on this. So it was 180 minus that 120 cost, 64,000. And then this gain is not truly a gain for tax purposes. It's usually a ordinary income. And if it's a short-term gain, it's also taxed as ordinary income. So it's basically taking into consideration how much money you're making during the year and using that marginal tax bracket to take away from these dollars. So I use the 35% just as a general guidance. So that's taken into consideration, like you're in the 25 to 20% tax bracket. And then again, in PA, it's 3% income tax for the state. And then there's also Philadelphia MPT and BIRT taxes. So this 64,000, I have it calculated to say that you're going to return 41,000 in cash. So this is your flip, and this is your BRRR. So as you can see, and I'll do this number right here. This is 44,000 for your BRRR. So you're basically obtaining the same amount of cash from your flip or your rental strategy, right? If you're looking to, if you don't have a job, for example, or you're looking to spend a lot of money, I guess you're going to want that cash. But if you know what you want to do with your savings and your money, I think that the BRRR strategy allows you to put it back into real estate fairly easily.
When you refinance, is that money taxed at all?
No, there is a possibility of it being taxed if you have an LLC. I forget the name of it now, but it's like basis. So if you take excess basis, there's a possibility of it being taxed, but generally no.
That's only if someone gave you the max amount for the house.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so appraisals, they're not supposed to be generous, but if you go and talk to the appraiser, they sometimes give a more generous appraisal, right? So
True, sir. Not this
you got to get on his good side. If you buy him a beer, he's going to give you a good appraisal. So yeah, so if you talk to the appraiser, tell them what you're doing to the property, tell them what you're doing to the neighborhood. Sometimes they'll be a little bit more favorable, and you'll most likely get the appraisal that you want to get, but there's no telling what you're going to get for the sale side. That's a good point. All right, so that's basically my flip versus BRRRR strategy comparison. Do you guys have any questions on that?
The main difference.
Real quick, I'm curious, where did you borrow the 40 grand when you first started the 80 grand? How did you get that first initial money for common questions that people get?
Yeah, so a good amount of money after I got out of college, right? When you do the college lifestyle, you can basically live off of nothing, right? Like I used to work a summer job and I used to make $4,000 in the summer, $4,000 to $8,000 in the summer, right? And I would be able to live the whole year off of that money, right? When I got my professional job, I was making a lot more than that $4,000 or $8,000, and I kept my same lifestyle. And I did this for about 2 years, right? So I knew I was going to get into real estate, and because of that, I was keeping the same lifestyle. So if you can imagine, I was dressed like this, I was in a professional environment, I was bringing my lunch every day because I knew what I needed to do to save that money. So a good amount of money came from that, and then a good amount of money after I proved myself, right? So this was probably like 14th deal, somewhere around there. After I proved myself, basically I was able to obtain private money financing through friends and family. And I still continue to use friends and family financing to this day. And then the next question is, oh, I don't know anybody with that type of money, right? So you kind of have to not be, I guess, creative and think outside the box, right? So if you guys have older people that you know, they usually have, or they not usually, but they may have their houses paid in full, right? So if they're creating any type of income, you can pretty easily get a line of credit on that paid in full house and offer them an additional amount to that interest rate. So the typical TD bank, big bank line of credit, or HELOC, they sometimes call it, is like 2.75% to like 4%. It's really cheap, right? If you're offering them 6 to 8% on that same money, they're basically making that money no problem, right? So that's a technique. Dave really likes the self-directed IRA. I have not received self-directed IRA money, but I actually self-directed my own 401k account, and I'm waiting to pull the trigger on something for that. So that's another good technique. I think you really just have to hustle and keep telling people. I mean, I'm in the position where I'm looking for money constantly right now. I'm trying to grow my business a lot bigger than it ever was. And what I've been doing recently is, with the working capital that I have, I've been buying just the vacants for $30,000, $40,000 and not having the money to do the construction, right? So that's really lighting a fire under my ass, right? Like, because I don't have the money to do the construction. So I'm reaching out to everybody and saying, look, I have these deals going on. I have these deals. I need construction financing. I'll give you 8%. I'll give you 12%. And every deal is different. And that's really helping me out in that regard. So, go ahead.
What's your acquisition strategy? Are you realtor, MLS?
Yeah, so I am an agent. I think I'm gonna get to that in this slide right here. So I'll skip down to the acquisition strategy. I am a licensed agent, but these days it's very difficult to find things on the MLS to purchase that are a decent deal. And again, back in Philly, basically everybody, there's a lot of money coming in, a lot of money coming from New York, and it's a bit harder if everything is going on the public arena. It's a bit harder to pull those deals. And that's not to be said that you can't get those MLS deals. I still pulled a couple of MLS deals, and the reason I pulled these is because I came in with an offer right as it hit the MLS, right? Without looking at the property, I basically said I'll pay this much money for it, considering that the worst possible condition could be inside that house. And in one of the situations, it kind of burned me in one regard. It was somewhat of a wholesaler that was selling it. I told him I'll pay this much. I went and saw the house later, and I felt like I paid a little bit too much. But he actually knew that I was a strong buyer, and he said, I have another property for you. I'll sell it to you for this much. And I said yes right away. And that property is a lot better than the other property, right? So just having people know that you're a strong buyer actually helps a lot as well. So MLS can happen. Most of my deals bought recently have been through wholesalers, actually. And I am comfortable paying wholesalers their fee, and I will pay their fee any day as long as I get my property for my price, right? And the wholesalers that I work with, I'm fair with them. I'm actually even giving one guy an extra $1,000 because he was able to secure the deal in a timely fashion. It was about to fall apart, and he asked for one of my lawyers to help him out. And I told him, if you can get this deal done in 2 weeks, I'll give you an extra $1,000. And magically, it happened. Like it was one of those things that money talks.
Can you just give me like a quick leader's dive version of wholesale?
Wholesale. So basically, wholesaling is like, I think there's a term called guerrilla marketing, right? Any possible way you can get your name out there, you get your name out there. Bandit signs, knock on doors, make phone calls, yellow letters, all those things to get your name out there and say, we buy properties, right? Some wholesalers that send those out actually buy properties and buy them themselves. Other wholesalers will go to a property, say we'll buy it, and say the property can sell in the market for like $30,000, right? The wholesale will say, I want to buy this property, but it's in poor condition. I'll buy it from you for 20, and he'll turn around and sell it to me for 30,000. So I'm getting my price. I'm not doing any of that the work. I appreciate the work, and I'm comfortable paying that spread of $10,000 for that work.
For the sign.
Yeah, so they sign it. So basically, what they do is they sign a contract for that 20,000, and then they sign another contract with me saying that I'll purchase the property for 30. And different wholesalers do it differently. Like most of the time, the wholesalers are just like straight up with me, and they'll sign it right away. But others will try to hide it until the settlement table. So it works out different each time. But I usually am pretty cool with paying that for what they
What's
do.
the average wholesale fee over there?
I've talked to one wholesaler, and he says his average fee is $8,000. Let me think about my other deals. The last one was almost like $12,000 that he was going to make, but he wanted to get the deal done, and the lady had multiple mortgages that were really old, and she needed to prove that they were paid off. So that $12,000, he agreed to pay off one of those mortgages. $12,000 turned into $6,000 right away. And it was good because the deal happened.
Right.
It was a secured $6,000 for him.
And the average is 5,000, you're paying the wholesale you're looking with?
Yeah, and then there was a deal that I did in West. I bought the property for $11,000. There's 3 wholesalers involved. One guy got $2,000. The guy I was talking to got $750, and he must have been on the phone with me for like a day straight. And another guy who was talking to the seller got $750. So they're different. They're different. But the reason they're okay with doing that is you get a buyer right away, which they got. Yeah, exactly. So $750 for 1 day's work, probably a lot more than I'm making. So. Another thing that I use a lot is Craigslist and Zillow, right? And everybody says like, oh, I can't find deals, but I'm on Craigslist twice a day. I'm on Zillow twice a day, and I'm talking to people that are in the market like pretty much all day. So I'm truly hustling to get these deals, and I am finding them too. But they are a lot harder than they used to be at the same time. And then my slide here is how to identify properties to purchase. And I think we kind of teetered off with the question. And I was explaining how do I find the properties to purchase. But the slide is more saying what you're looking for. So not before you get into the game, but you kind of have to get an idea of what you're truly looking for when you're buying real estate. And there's a lot of different factors in real estate, right? Not all properties are the same. They're actually very different. Every property is almost very different. One of the factors is your neighborhood. So there are investors that will say that they'll only invest in A-class neighborhoods, and in an A-class neighborhood, typically what you're going to have is you might have garages, you might have lawns, and even if you don't have those things, you're going to have a neighborhood where that's the neighborhood everybody would want to be in if money wasn't a factor, right? You got the best schools and this and that. The B-class neighborhood is a little bit less than that. C-class neighborhood would be your low-income neighborhood, maybe your Section 8 neighborhood, and that's kind of your D-class neighborhood as well. There's this one post that I read. The D-class neighborhood would be the neighborhood that you don't want to get out of your car in, right? So there's these neighborhoods you can invest in, there are investors for every neighborhood, right? So me personally, I'm probably in the BC neighborhoods. I'm not quite in the D neighborhood. I have one property that recently it had some trouble, and it was very close to the property. So that may be cheating on the CD line, but I try to stay in the BC. I actually got lucky with one of the neighborhoods I was very, very involved in early in my investing career. That kind of changed from B to A. So what type of tenants I get in there now are young professionals. They're making like 50 to 70,000, and they're 3 roommates, so it's 150,000 for like $1,400 in rent. So it's great pay for your rental. And your A-class neighborhoods, you're usually going to have less crime and less evictions, but that's not guaranteed. What I also noticed with the A-class neighborhoods, they may tend to appreciate more, but your rate of return is usually a lot less, right? So Bigger Pockets has this other rule, which is called the 1% rule or the 2% rule, right? And these aren't typically rules, they're more guidance, right? So for the 1% rule, they're saying that for every $100,000 you put into a property, you should have $1,000 in rent coming in, right? And again, this really doesn't apply to New Jersey because like in Trenton, I feel like you can find a 3% any day, right? Like it's got to be at least 3, or you're probably losing money, right? And I don't really invest in Trenton, but I know it's got to be 3. So then your 1% rule is for good neighborhoods, and basically what that's saying is you're probably going to have less expenses because these guys are going to be maintaining your properties a lot nicer. You're going to have less caretaking for the tenants, and probably a lot less hassle. And then your lower income neighborhoods, your BC neighborhoods, your rental ratio is probably going to be more in line with 2%, or you should aim to get more towards the 2%, because your gross rent, say $2,000 for the $100,000 you put in, your gross rent is $2,000. Your expenses are generally going to be a lot higher, right? You're gonna have to do more maintenance. You're gonna probably have to change appliances a lot more. On tenant turnover, you're most definitely gonna have to paint. Probably gonna have to change flooring a lot more than your prime properties. So that's the neighborhood difference. Another thing with the Brrrr strategy and with any buy and hold strategy, you're going to want to know your rehab capabilities or your abilities in general. I personally like to do a little bit more rehab, and I'll show you the slide later, but it ends up being that I'm paying initial costs up front and having less deferred expenses. But I'll get into that slide a little bit later. But rehabability is really big on purchasing a property. If you're comfortable with cosmetics, you want to look at cosmetic rehabs or no rehab. If you're comfortable doing full gut, plumbing, electrical, structure, then you can look at the whole spectrum. And then purchase price is always a big issue as well. What I like to do is kind of work backwards, like see how much money you have access to, see what you're comfortable with in your rehab, and then budget that, and then budget your purchase price and see what you're comfortable obtaining. And then there's 2 other rules. There's the 70% rule and the 50% rule. So the 50% rule was the expenditures, and the 70% rule is more for flips, and the Brrrr strategy as well, where you want your cost at least 70% of appraisal price.
Being at most, or
At most, I know that.
And what,
Yeah.
you're probably gonna lose money.
So rehabs, I guess what I'm trying to do here is explain the differences between the gut rehabs and the cosmetic rehabs. I've done both, and I guess, like I said before, my preference is more gut rehabs. The reason behind that is because in the gut rehabs, you get full new systems, right? And I'm holding most of my properties. So if I get full new systems, I know, I call it a 15-year property, right? I know I have a property that's going to be limited capital expenditures for 15 years. It also braces up and puts new structure where needed. So I know I'm going to have a strong building. And again, that 15-year property. I guess the bad part about doing gut rehabs is that you're paying a lot more upfront, and you might be paying more than the person next door. But on the other side, the person next door might not be doing these gut rehabs, might just be doing cosmetic fixes to get tenants in, and then they might have more plumbing problems, more electrical problems, more structural problems. So they're basically deferring out their maintenance costs, where I'm trying to even out my maintenance costs for 15 years and kind of front load it. Also with the gut rehabs, I feel like it's less limited to surprises. And I know that almost sounds like I'm not saying it right, but basically when you have gut rehabs, you know you're basically gutting, and you know you're replacing electric, you know you're replacing plumbing. Yeah, the scope is pretty well defined. You're doing everything pretty much. When you do the cosmetic rehabs, you pull this thing out, you pull that thing out, and you realize you're gonna have to do this, and it's like almost like a never-ending cycle. So I almost find it easier, like the way I have my business structure, and a lot of the properties that I do buy, I tend to buy like sight unseen. It's almost easier knowing and thinking the worst possible situation inside the house, and going for the full gut rehab so you can purchase the property and acquire the property. But I've been doing both. I've been doing a little bit more cosmetic as well. And the reason I've been doing a little bit more cosmetic is the time. When you do a gut rehab, you're looking at 2-3 months for 1,000 square feet. When you do a cosmetic, you can turn that in 2-3 weeks. And cosmetic still means like a little bit of fixing here and there, making sure the electric outlets work.
So since you're doing sight unseen and you're already thinking of gut rehab, how do you get the pricing? How you know what the gut rehab is going to cost?
There's
Square feet.
Yeah, you can use square feet. Like you can pretty much do gut rehab anywhere from like $60 to $100 a square foot, depending on what you have to change. I think concrete's like the most expensive thing. So if you have to replace your front wall or put any type of stucco, then that's when your costs climb like really high. So like in my low income properties, I want to limit the concrete and make sure that I don't replace the brick front, because most of my low income wouldn't allow for that in the return I want to have. So that's like the biggest thing. Like the brick is okay, the basement is parged and has a slab, and most of the time it doesn't. I gotta make sure the numbers will work still.
What's your target return you're aiming for?
It's hard for me to really express my return because I'm getting an infinity return. I'm pulling all my cash back out, right? So on cash basis, I'm 9 to 14%, and that's with heavy expense allocation, right? And that's the biggest thing, right? I could say that I'm 20% if I don't count my capital expenditure, allocate for my capital expenditure, allocate for my expenses monthly. Like there's always fixes, right? So there's always things breaking. Like if you get a new appliance these days, the appliances are going to go. So you gotta kind of budget for that. And with my budgets, I'm not 14%. That's kind of where I get into some arguments with too, because people are telling me like I'm making 22%. I jot it on paper. I'm like, wait, I'm not making 22%. I have better numbers than you. So there's another question.
Do you manage your own rentals, or do you?
No, I do not. I basically I don't know how to say it. I try not to do anything, right? So general contracting, I hire a general contracting property manager. I hired that out. I was basically using agents. I still use agents because I think that it helps out most of the time. What else?
Agent for what, for your tenants, you mean, front tenants?
Yeah, so well, my property manager does that, but agents to purchase property. So sometimes I'll put I'll offer through another agent, or I'll let here's another trick. I'll let the seller agent grab both sides of the commission, right? So if I'm putting an offer and he's on both sides, he's doubling his money for doing nothing, and I'll just sit quiet and hope that works. And it tends to work a lot better if he's getting both sides of the commission with my offer price than if he's not. So that's another trick. And then I actually even sub out my accounting as well. So I'm a CPA, and it's tedious to do bookkeeping, right? So I got connected with a bookkeeping company in India, and I basically offshore my bookkeeping. Yeah, and that's kind of why I have a business set up as well for bookkeeping, and basically I'm able to handle as many clients as possible because I have this offshore company that's doing my own personal bookkeeping. I have my mom paying my bills. So no, with my money though, with my money. So I sign all the checks, and my business address is my parents' address, so all the mail goes to her. I do everything. I do as much as I can electronically, but when the mail comes to her, she's able to scan it for me and sign the check. Not sign the checks, but write the checks and send them out. And then even tax return. I used to work with a staff guy, and I basically asked him to help me out with my tax return. He had a little bit more time than I did, and he prepped it. I reviewed it, and it saved me a lot more time than it was. So the money I saved was with my time and what it was worth, and I think it was cheap in that regard as well. So I like to try to do as little as possible, and that's not because I'm lazy or anything like that. It's more because I want to use my time to develop and acquire properties and manage the construction on these properties. And administrative tasks, I feel like I can hire at a rate that's a lot cheaper than I'm earning.
So you more of your time.
Yeah, it takes up too much of my time. And I have a little bit about cosmetic rehab, but I kind of explained the gut rehab, and then cosmetic rehab is kind of on the other side. It's a little bit easier. The scope always continues, but it's quick. So that's what I love about it, right? 2 to 3 weeks. You can get in a property, get out of the property in 3 weeks, and then get it rented in like another 2 weeks, and then get a refi if there's no season period. So that's great in that regard. And then talking a little bit about the Brrrr strategy again, you have your buy, your rehab. So I just explained how I acquire properties. I explained how I rehab properties with the comparison between cosmetic and gut rehab, and now the refinance. And the refinance is a little bit more difficult because there's a lot of moving pieces to refinances, and there's a lot of numbers the refinance deals with, right? You could probably have a presentation just dealing with how to refinance your properties and how to get your numbers in line with the refinance. So the biggest thing with this strategy and your refinance is most likely going to be appraisal, and because the appraisal is going to determine how much cash you receive back out. And most banks are doing 70, 75%. I was lucky with this deal. Most banks are doing 70, 75%. So the appraisal is a big factor. And how you're going to make sure that your appraisal comes accurate is you're going to really research the area you're in. You're gonna not lie to yourself and make sure that you're presenting the right comps to yourself and try to estimate the appraisal as reasonably as possible. Then a trick that I use is I try to meet the appraiser every time, right? The worst thing you can do is try to tell the appraiser what your property is worth, right? You try to get him to ask you the question, like, well, what do you think this is worth? And you say your number, and you also try to tell him. He's looking at me like this is not working with me. I haven't tried that yet. But you also explain like what you've done to the property and what's going on with the neighborhood, and just make sure that they're in tune with what's going on. And that I think will get you a better appraisal. If they see a face to you, you're not just some big name developer. You're a small guy, and you just talk to them like that. I think they'll try to work with you a little bit. Then another thing with refinance is your ratios, and the banks are really big with these ratios. Your debt to income ratio and your loan to value ratio. And I'm not going to go into detail on either one, but your loan to value, as it was explained before, is basically your appraisal price and your percentage of loan value, right? So I threw around 70 to 75 a lot. In this case, I got 80% loan to value. The other thing they're going to look at is your loan to value on a portfolio basis as well. So you got to make sure that your loan to value, they like 50 to 60%. But if you're new, it's going to be hard to get that 50 to 60%. So you just got to present yourself right, I guess. The other issue they look at is debt to income, and in the simplest form is just making sure that you're making enough money on your properties. And it's actually a good check to put your properties through a bank instead of just keeping it because they'll kind of tell you like, look, you're making good debt to income, you're not making good debt to income. So it's always a good check to put it through the bank as well in that regard. Another thing with refinance costs is points and interest rates and other bank costs. So if you look at the flip numbers again, you're going to see 20% came off the top. Refinance costs are typically not that much. You have for these portfolio lenders right now, I'm getting points at 0.8% to 1 point. The construction loan, I had 2 points on that. But points are basically just front end loan costs. You have other fees involved. You have like a review fee sometimes. I even had a bank try to get me with a appraisal review fee for $300, but I kicked that back right away. I'm not paying for that. And the appraisal was too expensive to begin with, so I wasn't going to pay for that. But there's all these fees involved as well. You just got to make sure that you're dealing with reputable banks that aren't trying to hit you left and right.
Do you ever worry that you over leverage? Because think about it, right? Let's say another 2008 financial calamity happens.
Yeah.
And let's say half of your tenants stop paying because they all get laid off.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Yeah. See, that's always in the back of everybody's mind, right? So my LTV is probably around 50%, and that's more because of appreciation in the neighborhoods I was in more than anything else. I basically got lucky, right?
But I guess my question wasn't so much pointed at the depreciation as far as like a lot of foreclosures in areas.
Yeah. So your debt to income.
Also thinking like along the lines of they stop paying you the rent.
Yeah. So.
The mortgage or property's more.
Yeah. I won't be able to do it, right? Basically, if nobody pays my rent, I won't be able to do it. But that's where the debt to income ratio comes into play. I also like try not to spend lavishly and keep my working capital in check. So I'm bracing myself for an event if it should happen, but I'm not going to get out clear. I'm going to have trouble. Like there's no doubt about that.
What kind of reserves you typically percentage-wise, budget numbers, What kind of reserve you holding for properties?
I don't know if I do it that way, right? I do it more as
35%.
I'm basically just trying to spend to maintain a lifestyle that I'm comfortable with, and anything else I'm trying to build back into the business. So I basically, if I flip, I'm gonna keep what I want to take, and then put the rest back in the business. So that's basically how I'm doing it. And it's creating working capital, growth in working capital, and that could be my reserves if necessary. But if everything happens in the wrong time, I'm gonna be sweating.
I guess, when you hear a lot of these commercials or infomercials at night, in real estate, whether you have bad money or bad credit, no money, you can still make money in real estate. For example, if you have bad credit or no credit, would the Brrrr strategy be a good strategy because you have to go to a bank and refinance?
Yeah, I doubt you could make it work. I don't like to say that it's not possible, and I don't like to say anything is possible, but I doubt you can make it work with bad credit. I myself had trouble financing with the bank, and that's why I legit have about 40 bank contacts, right? And I put myself in a position where my numbers are good. I calculate all my debt to income ratios. I calculate my LTV ratio. I make sure it's good. And there's just some banks that are saying, oh, we don't like the Westfield neighborhood, so we're not going to do this deal. And it's funny to me because I might have 3 or 4 loans with them, and they're telling me that they don't want to do this one loan because it's in another neighborhood, but their risk is already with me, right? Regardless, I'm going to get the loan with somebody else in that regard. So there's a lot of like nitpicking with these banks, and you gotta find the right bank for your product. But the bad debt is the bad credit is gonna pretty much hurt you a lot.
I would just say the only thing that I can think to make that work is you need to bring on a partner with a lot of income and a lot of credit. That's the only way I could see you make something like this work.
That's why I like to say like nothing's impossible, because there's always a way to kind of do it and get it done.
A lot of money.
Yeah. Oh, and I want to hear terms. So the gentleman in the back mentioned the five max loans. So those loans again are Freddie and Fannie products that get sold to Freddie and Fannie. Those loan terms are usually fixed for 30 years, and those are in your personal name. So fixed for 30 years in your personal name, and you're basically going to create a lot of cash flow, right? So any new investor that comes to me and asks, like, should I put my first property in LLC? I generally say no, right? You want the best situation possible for you in your first house, right? And the best position you can have on your refinance out is if you have it in your personal name. You can get a mortgage in your personal name. You can have it fixed for 30 years and amortize it for 30 years. You're gonna have the best cash flow you can have with those type of loans. As you grow, then the portfolio loans come in, and typically the portfolio loans are max amortization of 25 years, right? So you're amortizing over a less amount of time, which creates an increase in your mortgage payment, right? So that's one factor. The other factor is your interest rate is going to be higher, right? So your cash flow is limited not only by the length of the mortgage, but it's limited by your higher interest rate. And then the other factor is your rate lock is usually going to be 5 years, right? There are some banks that do 10-year rate locks. There's some banks that do 15-year rate locks, but you're looking at a 5-year rate lock. So in 5 years, you have the bank is not carrying the interest rate risk shift. You're carrying the interest rate risk shift.
That's not a 30-year fixed then? I don't understand. When it's commercial, it's just locked for 5 years.
Yeah. So when you're done your 5 loans and you go into your you get away from your Freddie Fannie and you go into your portfolio loans, you're generally going to have 5-year rate locks. And every bank does it differently. So you could find 10-year rate locks out there, and you could find 30-year rate locks. I know a bank that does 30-year rate locks, but interest is a lot higher. Exactly. So the 30-year rate lock, I think the email blast is like 7.75% for the 30-year lock on these portfolios, and you can easily get 4.5 to 5.5 these days with the regular portfolio 5-year lock. I have an example. It's very hard to see, but I'm gonna actually try to find out. How are we doing with time, by the way?
About 10 minutes.
Oh, 10 minutes. I see you guys pictures. Everybody likes pictures.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, right. Is everybody having fun?
Yay.
Have you ever bought to rent and then decided to flip it?
I've only
Anybody
flipped
here, I guess.
8, 10 minutes. 8 minutes. I've only flipped 8 minutes, and I pretty much knew I was going to flip. But I guess I have. Yeah, I tend to try to do the first strategy every time. So yeah, I guess it changed when I looked into the property and I saw some numbers come up, and then I just thought that it would be better to flip at that time.
Is there any particular reason for that, or just the numbers worked out that way?
I felt like I could take that money and put it into another property and get a better return on that money. But the tax thing kills you, so yeah. There. All right, so this is a property that I did. It's 1319 North Myrtlewood. There's a property in a section of Philadelphia called Brewery Town. I bought this property like 15 months ago, and at that time, there was large developers that were rebuilding the industrial buildings. And I was basically a block and a half away from the large developments, and they weren't completely done. And the area I was in was a rough area, right? So when I went and saw the property, there was legitimately drug dealing going on the block, and I was looking at a shell on the property, and I think I was getting close to the guy's stash, so he started confronting me. So like it was a tough neighborhood, right? So when I built this property, I kept it in a less rehab and cosmetic form. Didn't change anything structural. I made sure the structure was right, or my contractor made sure the structure was right. The electrical was good and the plumbing was good, and we updated to rent to low income. So here's a few pictures. And this was the property before, so you can see like the HVAC vents were run. Can you guys see that?
No, maybe this guy can, but none of the rest of us.
Don't worry, I can see fine, I'll describe it later.
So you can see the HVAC vents were run outside the walls. We actually fixed that. The bathroom. There was actually somebody living in here, so it was one of the better properties in terms of the condition. And this was the front of it. Was it rolling? Yeah, all properties that I buy are rolling. Oh wow. I only have one that's standalone, but it's like in the Rehab neighborhood, so.
Oh my God, elite, but why is that?
Yeah, that's what there are in Philly, and I'm comfortable with Philly, so.
Yeah.
I know you guys didn't see it, but there was a map, and if you guys could have seen it, I would show you that I find. So basically, you have your raw home, and you have your masonry structure, right? And I guess when kitchens, and these houses were built in 1900, so they didn't really have like kitchens. They didn't have plumbing. So when the kitchens and plumbing started coming and you had a small house, what they would do is they just build a shed outside, put the kitchen in the shed, right? And basically, a couple of times through from 1900 to like 1970, they would remodel these sheds, And this is what happened when you put a shed on dirt, and you get a mess after a few years. So this is reframed. And the shed was fixed. And then new flooring was put, new paint was put, the vents are boxed up. It should hold it this way, right? New water heater, new PEX plumbing. New HVAC unit. And then a little bit of parging in the basement. And it was like the most cosmetic rehab you could have with some structural damage in the property. So this property rehab cost me $25,000. I actually put granite in even in my low income units. That's something that is like debatable, I know. And the reason I do that is because I want a 15-year property, and I believe that it's going to last 15 years. I'm still testing the system, so I don't know if that's going to work or not. But this neighborhood is changing anyway, so I feel like this neighborhood might be a granite only neighborhood. And then because of the basement access, I was not able to put a washer dryer in there, so I put a stackable washer dryer in the kitchen.
Do you do things like thicker sheetrock or bulletproof flooring or something?
I've heard of everything. Like people are saying vinyl flooring is really good. Like the stick on peel and stick vinyl flooring, and other people will say, "Oh, I hate vinyl flooring. You can never match it up. You got to put it back in." And some people say put tile throughout the whole house. So there's like so many different ways to do it. What I've been doing recently is doing the vinyl snap together flooring, right? It's not laminate though. It's a vinyl, so it's bendable, right? The thing about that, you have to make sure your subfloor is pretty solid, and that's a difficult part. So sometimes when you have the guys put it down, you can see like a crack here and there. But I want to say that it's going to be durable, but only time can tell. I've also been doing carpets upstairs. I try not to put carpets on stairs because that's just like overly expensive. So I want to paint the stairs when possible. And then I do carpets upstairs, tile bathrooms. One of my friends will put the 3-piece around the shower. Yeah, around the shower. So there's a whole bunch of different ways to do it. I tend to spend a little bit more money. And I'll let you guys know how that works out in a few years, if that's okay or not. But what I do get with my low income tenant, I do get 650 credit scores or above, right? So everybody asks me like, how do you get something like that, right? Just because you're low income doesn't mean that you're not paying your bills, right? So it's out there. If you're putting out a product that's better than the rest, you're going to be able to find something like that, and that's created less hassle in finding tenants that are timely players. I feel like a few of the experienced guys have something to say. Do you have anything to say? Do you have a different strategy? Do you have a different strategy? Do you have any comments on my strategy? Yeah.
No, I think you're doing good. I think it's smart.
Yeah, so some of these older guys, Steve does Trenton, like how do you do your rentals in there?
Yeah, I mean in Trenton, it's really the big value add is getting a CO.
Yeah.
I mean that's it. You get a CO, like that's a big value add.
I had to put carpet on the stairs on this. It's like $600.
Certificate of occupancy.
Yeah, I think the carpet on the 2 rooms was like $600, and this was $600. Yeah, and then we painted the front. Go ahead.
Oh, before you wrap up, can you just talk about like your first deal?
My first deal was bad.
All the better.
At least he's honest.
I don't like talking about my first deal. But, so my first deal, it was 2009, and basically I was going to get into real estate investing. Right, I knew that the numbers worked, and I was just looking everywhere. I was looking at different things. Like I was living outside of Philadelphia, and I was like, oh, well, I'll get something outside of Philly. Like I don't have to deal with paying tenants, this and that. And then everything to me came to numbers, right? So in the suburbs of Philly, you were getting 6 to 8% rent return, right? And then basically a guy my brother knew, right? He was investing in Philly, and he shows us his portfolio, and he was trying to become a turnkey guy, which is basically trying to sell investors with money properties that work, right? So he's trying to develop his business, and we knew him for quite a number of years, so we had some trust. And he's showing me properties in Philly in the neighborhood I probably was the most successful in, and he's showing me returns of 10%, right? And when he showed me that, I'm like, I gotta get it, right? So I got in too hastily. I didn't know my numbers well. I wasn't educated enough. I mean, I thought I was educated enough. I was like, oh, I'm a college graduate, and like I know everything, right? But it doesn't matter your education, right? What matters is you're reading these books on Bigger Pockets, you listen to podcasts, you go to meetups, like you're talking to other investors. That's the true education in real estate, and I didn't have that at the time. So what I did, and it was me and my brother at the time, and what we did was we bought 2 properties, right? One property he had appraised, and he flipped it, and he bought it at market value. We bought it at the appraised value, and the deal was that made him a little bit of money. He's going to cut off the construction and the purchase of another property, right? So both properties we were together was going to make a big deal, a decent deal, right? As we thought. But what happened was after we purchased that one property, the first property, he wasn't able to commit to his obligation on the second property. He left us to finish the construction with our own money, and that's why the deal went very poorly. So what I would do differently is probably not have so much initial trust to somebody that's saying, oh, you can make money here, you can make money. If somebody's saying that, yeah, exactly, right? And that's not to be said like people that are saying, oh, you can make money here. Sometimes they can help you, right? So I offer the same thing, right? So I say, look, I can help you make money, but I never offer something so ridiculous it doesn't sound reasonable, right? So I like to say that I make 25% on my flips, right? So when I say that and I offer 12%, it's basically a partnership at that time, right? A 50-50 partnership without equity problems or drama, right? I'm giving you 12%, even if I make 18%, even if I make 8%, I'm giving you 12%, right? So that's the difference. I would be more reasonable with my expectations when I first started. Like check out your comps a lot more, and don't. I guess you can trust but verify everything, right? How agents make commission is by selling properties, right? So if an agent tells you that this property is going to be worth $200,000 after it's done, you got to make sure that the comps relate to the agent's conversation too. Any other questions?
What would you contribute to helping you get your business started? What did you do, or who did you talk to that actually helped put you in the position that you are today?
I have a really good friend that I actually got into the game, and I went out every Saturday with him to look at properties, and I did it for no other reason than I like to look at properties, right? So the first deal was probably what got me into the game. The second is helping this guy find his first deal, and he paid that back to me in ways that I can't even explain. Right? He helped me find properties. He got bigger than me, so he helped me find properties. He actually funded me for a few deals. What else has he done? Oh, he even has his admin property managing for me and helping me out too. So, like just that small favor of helping him look at properties when he first got started, paid dividends back to me in return. So that was helpful. And then friends and family loans has really been helpful for me. There's no way I would be where I'm at today without getting additional financing from these guys. And they trusted me with pretty much their life savings. Like a lot of these people, like say they'll have like 50 and they say, oh, look, I'll give you 50 for like a year, but I want to buy a house, right? So that's their down payment on the rest of their life pretty much. And to have that trust and for somebody lending me that type of money, that's like an honor and a privilege, and that's really helped me out as well. Any other questions?
Cool. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.